So what is a product manager? A product manager is going to be the people in your organization that is looking or are looking into where are different products going to be in the future. How are we solving problems from the users? And how are we taking these solutions that we are building as products and trying to deliver the biggest impact for our business? Hey, Juan here. So today we are going to talk about what are product managers and how are they actually doing their job and what are the things that they take into account in order to be able to achieve their work. So as you can imagine, a product manager actually manages a product, which is quite obvious on itself. But a product is the way of companies, especially tech companies, of bringing solutions to actual user problem. The very important thing for a product manager is to understand how to be able to achieve this solution and how to be able to prioritize all the potential different ideas that are coming all the time to the product manager, typically through or via different stakeholders, and make a consistent and proper roadmap to be able to get you to that solution that you want to achieve for your customers. So the very first thing that a product manager is going to have to think about is what is the vision for the product that she or he is handling. This means, and by a product I don't mean necessarily a whole product, it can be a set of features within a bigger or larger product. But you have to have an understanding of what is the vision, where do we want this product to be in the future, and how is it helping our users. So defining what is the problem and solution, what is the actual vision of the product. And then there's going to be what are the strategies for me as a product manager that I will have to focus on in order to achieve this vision. So strategies are going to be the quick paths or the quickest paths for you to achieve your vision. These strategies, what we'll create is a framework that will help you bring focus on what you're building within your product. So today we are going to try to break this into 3 different topics. So the first one, we are going to talk about how the design phase of a product happens. During the second one, we are going to talk about the execution phase of the product. And in the last one, we are going to talk about the go-to-market. How do we actually launch and make this available for our users? So first of all, when we design products or when we design new features for a product, the most important is to see how we can actually understand the problem, understand the potential of the problem, and define some kind of solution for this problem. So first of all, when you start designing a product, you should focus on properly describe the problem that you see that it exists within your product or that it exists for the customers that you will bring a new product to actually solve the problem that these customers are having. So early on, I talk about the vision and strategy, and this is very important that you have done previously and as one of the first things that you do as a product manager. Because the first thing when you define a problem or identify a problem, you should try to always make sure that this problem aligns with your vision, aligns with your strategy. So whatever problem that you're finding is not taking you away from the direction that you want your company to go towards. Once you have found out this problem, once you have made sure that it actually aligns with our strategy, that it aligns with our vision, then you have to identify what are the customer segments. Try always to pinpoint and narrow down who are the people that you're going to be helping here. Who are the people that are actually having the problem? And never go to the conclusion that everybody has a problem, because it's never the case basically that everybody has a problem. Pretty much 99.99% of the cases, there's only going to be a fraction of customers or even of your existing customer base that is going to have this problem. So if you are talking about education, who are you trying to educate? What is the people that you are trying to help if you're building a product around education? Are you trying to help people or kids in the school age, or are you trying to help people that are actually nowadays working? So if you're trying to help people that are nowadays working, that's first step of defining your customer segment. Are you helping people that are working in a certain type of industry that would narrow down even more your customer segments. And then within that industry, who are the actual people that really would take advantage of the solutions that you're building? That starts to give you the real case scenario of who are your customer segments and who are you going to serve and how are you going to help them solving the problems that they have. And why it's important to have customer segments? Well, if you have customer segments, you can move to the next step, which is calculating your total addressable market. How big is the potential of solving this problem? Once you understand these customer segments, then it's easier to understand what is the potential of solving this problem. How is this going to create an impact also on the business that you're working? So now we have a little bit of an understanding of where we are at, what is the potential problem that there exists. We understand who could be the people that we are solving it for. But now we have to start to play with the ideas that how are we actually going to solve this problem? Typically you don't want to jump into direct conclusions. You want to start with different mock-ups and different scenarios that you could play with certain potential customers. Potential customers can be existing customers if you already have products available, or it can be people that will benefit from the products that you're building in the future. Typically you can drive these ones as surveys or interviews with those customers. It's good to have a relatively sizable amount of users to talk with, because of course then it will validate better the different options that you actually are proposing to the customers or to the potential customers. Once you have built these mockups, once you have conducted these surveys, once you get the results from your users, then you can start playing with the different design ideas, where you could actually start designing some kind of version that you could start working with, where you actually have already defined what is going to be basically my MVP, initial MVP of how am I going to drive and build the solution in the future. This of course is going to involve a lot of the actual product design. It's going to include the how are we going to build the user experience and how do we think that the users are going to actually interact with the product. And of course, making products easy to use is a very good way of getting attention from your customers. And now we go into the execution part. But once we have designed now what is the solution for the problem, once we have built up the first mock-ups and gotten the feedback from those potential customers, then we want to move into the execution part. Here, obviously, we have to work already a lot with the engineering teams. We should have worked already previously with engineering teams, especially to understand which ones of the different options that we are actually proposing to the customers are the viable ones or the realistic ones. At this point, we are going now into how do we build prototypes to start proving the concepts, to start proving the solutions that in a way we are working around. This doesn't mean that it's going to be the solution that we will eventually be launching. What we want to be able now is to do prototypes that we start testing and giving out to those specific users that we have been talking with. Let them play with it, give us feedback, and see if they actually make sense for them. And of course, this is an iterative process that I give you a prototype, you test it, see what works, see what doesn't, give me your feedback, then I analyze your feedback and see where should be the potential developments. Of course, most likely when you start the development, there's going to be a lot of things that potentially are not going to work as expected, and they will need either explanation towards the user because why they don't work, maybe that is something that we will take later on, or maybe something that the user actually has identified that we didn't expect. How do we address that problem? Once we have iterated several times, once we have validated the different prototypes with those users, that we understand that this is actually something that the users need, that is actually solving the problem, then we can move into the next phase. And here we are moving towards A/B testing. What we want to do at this point is we want to test these prototypes, or we want to test this version, call it an MVP, with a selected group of customers. This typically is handled by releasing the feature first to either a certain type of customers that they have a certain profile, or making it available on a specific country or region and not to everybody in the whole world at the same time. What you want to achieve with A/B testing is to make sure that does the behavior of the people that get the new feature compared to the ones that they stay with the old feature or with the absence of the feature. Does this translates into whatever KPIs I have defined for being the success of this launch of the product. This can be generating more traffic into our website. It might be that we want to actually drive more sales. It can be many things. But we have to make sure that we are able to measure that this new feature, it actually makes more sense compared to this feature that we used to have in the past. So this is why A/B testing. A/B testing, you release the new feature to a certain group, see how they behave, and compare it with the existing available product to all the rest of the market and see if their behavior changes. If it doesn't change, then it's back to the drawing board. Again, iterate, try to find the correct solution. You are at this point thinking about how am I going to launch the product? How am I going to launch this new feature? But before you launch, you have to think about what are your success KPIs. I just touched briefly a little bit with the A/B testing, and you should have them available before the A/B testing even. You have to define what is the goal that you want to achieve by releasing a new feature. As I said earlier, is it something that I want to drive new sales, or is it something that I want to make life easier to the users? What does life easier to the users mean? So I have to be able to track, ideally with all the available data, all the events of how this feature is being used, how is it being adopted, and it is actually a successful adoption from the customer point of view. So defining your success KPIs, and it doesn't have to be one, it can be several, is very important even before you actually launch the product. And now we go to the actual launch. So you typically will have some kind of formal launch of your feature, and this depends a lot on what you are selling, what type of products you are building. It depends on if you are building tech products, if you are building physical products. If you are building tech products, it can be desktop apps, it can be mobile apps, it can be SaaS. It depends a lot, and the answer is going to be it depends. It depends on how you work, it depends on what you sell, what is your product. You will have to take one strategy or the other, and it will be differing in all the different cases that you will have. But what is important is that try, if possible, to do gradual rollouts of your product, because you want to see and track the behavior and the adoption of this feature in different areas. So if you can try to roll out in different countries at different times, so you can roll out in different regions, for example, and these are somehow broken down by profiling them. So similar regions most likely will get the feature at the same time. And once you have wide enough results, wide enough KPIs gathered that this is successfully being adopted by everybody, then you can roll to everybody else. Why you have to do this? Many times you have to look into things like localization. How is your product localized in different regions? Sometimes localization is just a matter of language, sometimes it's a matter of actually resources that are actually available within the product. So you have to see how and when are you on time with the different releases in the different regions. This is why it's important to have a plan for rolling out the feature, maybe in a gradual way and not necessarily in a big bang release. The problem with big bang releases is that you just get the feedback from every place at the same time without typically very wide beta testing or testing from the customers, which means that you really don't know how the feature is behaving or the product is behaving. So the more that you test, the more that you prototype, the more that you try to validate with different types of customers your idea before you go into the actual launch, the better, the safer you are going to be, and the more predictable is going to be the outcome. Yes, I already talked about how do we launch, and that's not completely correct, obviously. Before you launch, you actually had to think about your go-to-market. And this is something that many times is overlooked, by either product managers. Sometimes this is not necessarily a responsibility from the product managers or the product teams. So it depends a lot in the company. Sometimes there's companies that have dedicated go-to-market teams. So when you go to market, you're talking about how am I making sure that whenever I make available a product, people are going to first notice it and adopt it. So it is very important that before you go into this rollout, this launch, you actually have a proper go-to-market plan where you understand how am I going to be launching this product, how it's going to be adopted by the different markets, and how am I going to make aware customers about this product and solution that I have been building. So when you talk about go-to-market, there's many different aspects, there's many different things that have to be taken into account. But the first of all is that obviously you have to have a product that is ready, that it fulfills what we think it should fulfill, which means that it is solving a problem for an existing group of customers. And this depends on what you're doing. Is it a new feature within an existing product or is it a brand new product? You will have to think about pricing. How are you going to price either the feature? Sometimes you don't need to actually change your pricing policy because of adding a new feature. But if it's a new product, for sure you are going to have to look into how you are going to price your product. And this depends a lot on where you are at. If you're releasing a product where you actually have competition, then you are going to be probably tied to the constraints that the pricing of the competition is already giving you. When you go to build a new product where there's nobody that is offering the same kind of product, that's a greenfield for you. And there, the maneuverability to set the price is completely different and of course much wider because there's no solutions. Then the price tag can be higher compared to when you have competitors on the market. And then when you think about how do I actually go to market, you have to think about the customer journey. So how are people going to find out about your product? How are you going to promote it? Because just launching a product and just throwing it in an app store, I hope that people are going to find it. It's hoping quite much. So you actually have to help your potential customers figuring out that you actually have built a product that solves their problems. Then you actually have to pay attention also that how easy is for a customer to adopt and purchase your product. How easy it is, do they have to go through tons of pages to actually be able to make a contract, or can they just go to an app store and purchase it directly and easily? Or is there some easy subscription that can be done in a matter of minutes and then you are good to go? Of course, there are very different solutions that the more complex it gets, the more wider, that more people have to adopt it. For example, in your company, if you're thinking about B2B, then it's usually not a couple of minutes exercise and it probably is some potentially days and sometimes even weeks to actually being able to do this. Even in some cases, it gets even more complex where it actually depends on how this is going to be set up within your company. Then you might be talking about weeks and who knows what. And one of the things that we have to think about purchasing and actually this consideration phase from the user is how can we help them to actually make this decision as easy as possible for them. So how can we make the decision or the purchasing decision quite low threshold for them to start using our product? Then of course you will have to pay attention on how people are going to learn how to use your product. Of course you want to make it as possible or as much as possible you want to make it easy to use. So UX, usability, is going to be something that you have to pay a lot of attention. Still, in many cases people will have to still learn how to use your products. So how are you going to plan that you can help them how to use your product? So this can be online materials, it can be online documentation, it can be a ton of videos in YouTube. It can be many different ways, but you have to plan this and make sure that you understand how can you create something that is as much as possible scalable, that it depends very little on actual trainings, physical trainings, one-to-one sales cases. How can you build something that is scales up as much as it can on its own? So this is very key when you're doing your go-to-market. And finally, you're going to have to think about how are you going to support your product. Are you going to have some kind of online community where people can go and ask and get help from each other, potentially also from people from the company? Do you have a dedicated line? Can be email, can be some Slack, can be Discord, can be whatever you can imagine to give access to your users, that it will help them get the answers that they need. Can you automate it as much as possible? Can you build some kind of chatbot that already has some kind of access to a database that of questions and answers that are typical from your users? And do you have a backup, actually first line support or second line support, whatever it is that you have? It is very important and very key that you have these things planned for the beginning. And you don't have to have all of them when you go to your MVP, but you have to understand that at some point these things are going to happen. And maybe I want to have a chatbot in the future, and this will happen in 1 or 2 years from now. But what happens while I don't have a chatbot? How am I going to handle potential questions from the customers? So this is very important to have defined from the get-go. So go-to-market in the end is just making sure that launching a new product, launching a new feature is going to be as successful as possible, and it's going to create the biggest impact potential in your company. So let's summarize a little bit. This has been a long video. There has been quite much content, quite many bullet points here. I will link to different videos that I have created in the past where I talk about the different topics that we have been covering here. But in a summary, what you're going to do as a product manager is build products that solve customer problems and at the same time creating the biggest impact for your company. And this will be done in different phases by, first of all, defining a vision and a strategy for the product. How am I going to focus and deliver something that really is going to help people? By properly designing the solutions that will address the problem, and always talk with your customers and actually get feedback from them. How am I going to execute that I had the best potential solution for my customers? How am I going to actually go to the market and release and make this available to my customers? And how am I going to validate these different prototypes that I will have built and make sure that they are answering the questions from the user? And in the end, how do I make sure that I promote this, that everybody knows that I'm going public, that this is available, that they can adopt it, that it's easy to use, that I'm there to help you to actually solve your problems as a company. So that's the job of a product manager in a nutshell. There's a lot of things to pay attention. You don't always have to do these things on your own, obviously. There's going to be a lot of people that you will have to work with in the company. Sometimes you are not going to be the main driver for some of these things, so you will be acting more as a stakeholder in some of these tasks. But you will have to pay attention to all of this and raise the flag when they are not properly covered. These are the things that are actually going to be very critical for you as a company to address in order to make successful launch of products. And if you have been looking around, there's many channels that are covering how to do interviews for product managers, and many of these topics are the things that are covered also within those interviews. So some of you that are looking how to get into product management might have found out some similarities of what I'm talking here to what you see in other channels, like I believe that is Exponent and Product School, that they are talking about how to do mock-up interviews. And many times they are going into the same things of how actually as a product manager I should be doing a proper design of a product, or how should I do a launch of a product. Check those channels, they are actually quite good. So today we have talked about quite many things. So what do you think? Is this too much for a product manager? It might be. It actually is a lot of work to be a good product manager. Most of the people that are product managers are not going to cover all these phases in the same level, and there's going to be, as always, different types of product managers that focus more in one area than another. It's just a matter also about how do you leverage your skills and your knowledge, especially when you are thinking about the things that you are not the strongest in. But how about you? Do you have product managers in your company? If you are watching this video, I assume that you have. What would be the responsibilities of a product manager? What is a product manager in your company? Because this position changes a lot from company to company. If you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Stay safe.